Cube is a 2021 Japanese remake of the 1997 Canadian horror film of the same name. 2 years ago, during my Interpreting the Scares event of 2020, I reviewed the Canadian trilogy of Cube films, which if you have not seen, I highly recommend them since they're all very similar yet incredibly different at the same time. I may be the only guy that had the Japanese remake as something really highly anticipated for a while. I mean, I loved the idea when I heard that they were doing it. So is it worth the hype? Let's get cracking. If you've seen the film in 1997, you know what you're in for. A group of strangers that wake up in a strange cube-shaped room. Each wall, ceiling, and floor have a door that connects them to another cube-shaped room. Some of these rooms have motion detection traps that kill whoever enters, some don't, but the people must work together to try to solve each riddle, survive, and ultimately escape. One thing that I really wanted to know going in was if they were going to make this their own thing or just fully remake the original film. And I'd say it's about 70% the same exact thing and like 30% minor adjustments. So like adjustments in characters, character backgrounds, some of the traps are dealt with slightly differently, etc. But it's mostly the same movie. The nice thing about that is after 25 years, pretty much anybody can make a better Cube movie on a technical level. Primarily speaking, we're talking about the effects that are much better. And the performances were definitely stronger all around than the oftentimes corny acting of the first film. I mean, I've always said that the performances of that first film weren't very good, but what drowned that out in general was the concept of this infinitely spectacular premise. But here's the thing, we've seen lots of these types of movies before, right? I'm talking about escape room mechanics. A bunch of people trapped together, forced to solve riddles to avoid deadly traps. Heck, some of the Saw movies are just that. But it's hard to really convey how unique of a big picture there really is in these Cube films, and how much of a character the Cube itself is. It really does kind of have its own unique identity, really, yet everything that I've said so far is just arguments for the original film. What about this one? What about the Japanese remake specifically? Honestly, there's not much to say. Like I said, it's close enough to the original film to where if you had to watch one, I'd probably still just watch the original movie. One of the biggest draws for any of these films is how the characters figure out how to solve the riddles. And all the movies are different in that department, but they use the same method in this movie as the original one did 25 years ago, and I don't know if that was entirely necessary. They could have just technically made this Cube 4. None of the Cube movies in the past have been connected. You didn't have to watch one to watch the other, so there's really no reason why this couldn't have just been another film in the same exact series, and it just takes place in Japan. There's no reason why they couldn't do that. Because what they ended up doing is really just rehashing the first film, not really coming up with anything new or creative or unique or original, really. So a lot of it felt unoriginal. Think about it. I mean, they're just riddles. There's so many different ways that you can go about it. I don't know, I just think that this one could have been better. But yeah, in general, better graphics. Amazing set design as usual. Smart solving of the riddles, even though it really is just copy-pasted from the first film. But I have to admit, I didn't care about each individual character like I did in the original first film of the Cube series. There wasn't as much diversity in this film as there was in the 1997 movie, and thus not as much of a mix of cultural backgrounds for these characters and what they ultimately bring to the table. What they did here was fine, but it could have been more. I hate to say it, but the main complaints that people have about American remakes, I'm having for this Japanese remake. It's not a bad movie if you've never seen the original Cube film, but if you have, it's definitely subpar. One of the biggest problems is getting incredibly repetitive on a melodramatic, traumatic event that one of the characters went through in their lives. They have a flashback to this event, and they have the same flashback over and over and over again. For this one character, it gets to be repetitive. There's more than one person in this movie. Why do we keep focusing on them and their flashback? It got old. Focus on somebody else. And what they did with that traumatic event, I don't know. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. I understand what they're trying to do. And I understand what they're trying to convey. Obviously, they're going for character development, coming from an intrinsic question on if the torturous life outside that they're trying to get to is all that better than the torturous life that they're living currently inside the cube. It's supposed to be at least in part psychological. I get it, but I don't think that it fully comes off that way. I mean, life outside at least has Big Macs, right? Let's quickly look at my final score for a second. Unsurprisingly, the remake is my lowest scored Cube film out of the bunch with a C letter grade and final score of 62%, comprised, of course, of a fair unbiased score of 68% and personal bias score of 56%, which ultimately just means that even though I wasn't as engaged as I was with any of the other Cube films, I still found part of the film to at least have its moments, and the production design of the cubes, the traps found within it, and slight diversions from the original film sometimes was smart, but as a whole, it's not quite enough for me to call this a superior film. If you're a Cube enthusiast or Cube completist, be my guest, watch it. But if not, it's probably best to just stick to the original trilogy. Guys, have you seen the Japanese remake to Cube yet? And if so, I want to hear your thoughts about it in the comments section down below. Which Cube movie is your favorite? And as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit that like, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when I come up with my next review. And until then, peace out!